Do you know what it does to you? Hydrogen cyanide? Look upon your work, Mala.
It's interesting that for all the villains in Bond's long history and their bids for world conquest / destruction, all of them usually have a very normal, understandable motivation, most of the time stemming from simple greed. So normal are their modus operandi, you could even say that they are sane in the strictest legal term. Hey, Dahmer tested sane, anything's possible. It's with that thought process in mind that leads me to conclude that Raoul Silva may very well be one of the few Bond villains who is truly, and possibly even legally, insane. By traditional Bond villain logic, Silva's MO of getting revenge on M has no monetary benefit. In fact, other villains would probably look at him and say, and there's a very good reason why. Because all the other villains went to ridiculous lengths and ultimately failed to achieve what Silva has. For all intents and purposes, Silva has already conquered the world prior to us even knowing he exists. Silva has already developed an empire that can topple governments with a simple keystroke. He laid claim to an entire island and cleared out the population simply by creating a fake disaster to scare off the locals and authorities. If you want proof, look at what he did to MI6, and he wasn't even in the country. It could even be argued that had Silva not outed himself to M, he probably could have remained anonymous, while toppling governments till his dying day. Silva is the ultimate personification of what happens when the villain wins, because the one thing villains usually never think about: what happens after you win? Will it fill that void in your soul that in all likelihood is the impetus behind your efforts? Silva has an entire ghost nation under his wing, and yet he sacrifices it all to assuage his hunger for revenge. There's no gain in killing M. All it does is put a target on Silva. But in his madness, all the riches in the world don't even begin to distract him from the dubious slights inflicted upon him by M. It tends to lend some perspective to the idea that material wealth is just a placebo to deal with the pain you have inside, and Silva's pain has driven him to such madness that he decides to tirelessly hunt down M and kill her. What's worse is that Silva doesn't even know if that's enough. Not until he sees a mortally wounded M in the chapel does Silva realize that even revenge isn't enough. And were it not for Bond's intervention, Silva would have brought M down with him in a suicide attempt. While M did die soon after, at least it was on her own terms and not Silva's. As for Bond, Silva actually looked at Bond as something of a kindred spirit. At first glance, it seems like they have a lot in common. They both have a long history with M and MI6, and both were tossed aside for a strategic advantage. The difference between the two, and the thing that enables Bond to rise again, is his understanding of the necessity of sacrifice for the sake of the greater good. Bond knew that M made a call based on bad judgment. He confronted her on the issue and got past it to get the job done. And the two of them knew that they were going to have to make a similar call, knowing that that was the only way to catch Silva. They knew that Silva's obsession with M would lead him to scour the earth to kill M, and there was no telling what Silva would do after he achieved this goal. For all we knew, Silva would have just kept lashing out, causing disasters all over the world. He would have gone on to cause chaos had the circumstances landed any other way. For most other Bond villains, it's all about Bond stopping their endgame before it comes to fruition. In Silva's case, it was about Bond stopping the rage of a profoundly disturbed man from becoming a plague upon the world.